Well, okay, guys. So let's start. I'm recording this anyway for those guys who can't come here. So I know there is a cold around and flu, so it's probably quite a lot of people sick. I was sick during the holidays, like most of the time. So let's start. The unit called create 3D digital environments. So the good thing about the sequence of this unit that it's kind of logical continuation of the unit which we did in the previous term, which is apply texturing. In which way they're similar, we're going to use the same workflow. So we're going to create a stylized environment. So it's the same logic of creating something which is stylized to the certain content. And we're going to use pretty much the same workflow for creating assets, props, modules, and textures. So we're going to start mostly in Maya. Then we're going to create a high resolution version of the asset using ZBrush or just creating a high resolution version in Maya. It all depends on the actual geometry. Then we're going to use mainly Substance Painter to create a material set of texture maps for the assets. And then we're going to send everything into the game engine, and we're going to create materials and apply them to the meshes, low resolution meshes. So we're going to do UVs, etc. So in that sense, that would be, you kind of repeat the same workflow. That workflow has many steps, but you're already familiar with. So all you need to do is just do them a couple of more times, and then you will be quite confident in this workflow. So what I want to sort of reiterate or stress that this is current workflow, and that's the set of skills which is required for any jobs which is um, somehow linked to create anything in environment, whether it's characters, props, whether it's stylized or realistic. So the workflow is pretty much it's a low resolution, high resolution model, or the other way around. It's Substance Painter for creating textures as a main industry software. ZBrush in the mix. So that's what we continuously see in all job specifications. Then you go into the advanced deployment, start looking at the job advertising. That's what the people want in the industry. So the other things which we're going to look again for this particular unit is we're going to look at Substance Designer. We're going to look at tileable textures. And the main difference with the previous term, okay, yeah, I can see that, Stone Town Zima Temple. And the main difference with the previous term is that we guys actually, this time around, we have to design environment. So, what else? Sprites. Hide all. And so, volume sprite. On a light components, live types, static meshes, particle sprites. No. Yeah, here we go. Okay. So we need to actually learn how to design environment. So that's the main difference. So in terms of what you have to produce and what kind of support is going to be given to you, it's actually quite different. So it's basically this time around, you have to produce 100%. So I'm not going to give you measures. I'm not going to give you concepts. I'm not going to basically show you how to produce each single module or asset for your environment. So you would have to use skills that you learn new skills, extend, and then you have to produce the lot. What the main implication of that is that you also need to learn how to manage the project, not just in terms of the step-by-step operations and milestones, but in terms of your own expectations. So the idea is that, well, I show you environment which I built last year as a demo for students. But that's environment which I built with my skills and my experience with the given time. So what we'll concentrate on in the first couple of weeks, then you start working on the first stage, which is concepts, that your concept is actually doable. Yeah, in terms of the amount of work, in terms of the volume, in terms of the complexity. So that's a first restriction which you need to put on yourself, and you need to manage it in the sense that you need to try to come up with idea which actually utilize the minimum amount of assets and easy to build. But in the same time, it's exciting for you to work on. So I don't want you to compromise on excitement and your genuine desire to create, but I want you to be very smart about the amount of the work. And then we're going to learn how to actually do it modular, so we're not going to create infinite amount of different pieces. We're going to create a very limited amount of pieces, and then you're going to use them as a building blocks of your environment, which is called modular. Okay, so now let's get back to the unit, because that's our sort of roadmap. And what I want to do today is, well, basically to go in this page, which is called introduction. And I want to get all over all the steps, just the project flow, and explain how we're going to build it. Because there is a certain amount of milestones. It is like this on introduction page. There is headings here. Reference, creating proxy, block out, creating basic lighting, refine modular asset, blah, blah. So that's, let's say, 9 steps. And idea of this unit that you need to learn how to manage projects with that amount of complexity. So the outcome of this, that you will learn how to plan the project using the scheme which I give you, schematics, and you learn how to go through the steps and achieve success at each single step going forward. So you will learn how to actually manage a complex project and be on top of that, rather than being overwhelmed, just crushed by emotions, unrealistic expectations, all this negative thing. So that's actually skill, and that's the skill which is not easy to learn, because you need to manage not just the project, but your own expectations and emotions, as I mentioned. And that's usually what define the professional guys. So then you become professional, you actually learn how to do it. You see the project, you see the complexity, you know your pathway, you know your milestones, and you know how to manage them, how to go from one milestone to the second milestone and actually achieve all desirable outcome each single time. So that's the main objectives. In terms of the skills, as I mentioned, that's opportunity for you to enforce the skills that you learned and add a little bit to the mix. So what kind of support I'm going to provide you? I'm going to explain you and give you examples for the first maybe 5, maybe 6 weeks, and maybe let's say 5 weeks. I don't know how we go. Well, we have the whole day. And then a little bit at the end as well. And I will demonstrate how to actually tackle each single milestone. How to do it, what software to use, where to start, how to continue, when it's done. And obviously, I'm going to give you individual feedbacks and support with your own projects. So in that sense, all you need to do basically is come into the class, go through the sessions, and do your homework. In terms of the time, we have, well, let's say 9 weeks, yeah? Or probably 10 weeks in terms of the, if we look at the calendar, but realistically 9. And we have 9 steps. So you have to achieve a certain milestone pretty much every week. So they may be not 100% aligned milestone with the weeks, and maybe you will spend a little bit more than you create, let's say, your high resolution assets. Yeah, it's a little bit more work for that particular step. Yeah, but the point is that in terms of the project management, there is no time to lose in this project. So you need to work consistently through the term. And if you do so, I can pretty much guarantee you a successful outcome. So if you follow the steps, come to the class, going through the task. If you hit a certain problem, I'm always here to help you. And there is a certain set of practical tutorials which I'm going to, demonstrate how to do certain things in class, which is, I think, well, common for everyone, regardless of what you're going to do. So that's just a very general outcome. In terms of the scope, let's see that particular, like a Greek temple, that's a student work from a year ago or something. Yeah, so it's very good work. And that's probably a very good example of the amount of work which is realistic to achieve. You can see that there is a column here, there is architectural detail, portic, and there is like a little bits and pieces, which is actually modules, and then you can, put together this temple out of these pieces. Okay, so now what I want to do is briefly go through all these 9 steps, so you have the overall picture of the project, yeah? And then after that, well, you can ask the questions as we go. You can just by all means interrupt me because there's actually quite a lot of talking. I maybe forget something, so if you have any questions, always ask. And then you will actually start working on doing the very first step, which is concept and research. What else I want to say before I actually dive into the concept and research step? Once again, the pass level in the assessment task, I'm not going to read the assessment task as such because, well, basically, what you need to concentrate on actually creating an environment. The paperwork is, I always try to make it as simple as possible. Yeah, so it's really not a problem. So as far as you create environment, it will be very easy for you to fill out the paperwork. It's just the screenshots of your different stages and feedback tables, etc. So the minimum requirements is easy to achieve. Once again, if you want to excel and basically if you're serious about getting into the industry and become professional and get employed at some stage, like sooner rather than later, you the one guy which I met many years ago in some kind of conference, and he's a CEO of the small company, and he said, well, back in uni, I was like a distinguished student. We don't have this credit distinction, high pass, whatever, which we should actually. Um, but what he said, then I get into the industry, I realized that the only grade that actually pass in the industry is high distinction, because you don't need in the industry if you can't deliver something to the high distinction. It just, there is no need for mediocre work in industry. It's so competitive. So the point is that apart from, I'm going to kind of give you these examples for this base level, but I'm also going to give you extra resources like a video tutorials, which is plenty now on YouTube. And I just carefully select like the best examples. And my advice is that at least you go through the videos, which is like the extra resources for you, because they will be a source of inspiration to start with, just give you more incentive to actually strive for this distinction level. And also source of knowledge to extend your skills, beyond the demo class, and get perspective from the different artists on the same problem. And once again, I think that's the best approach to learn. So don't try to learn from a single source, learn from the multiple reliable sources, and then that will give you the picture from different angles and the best chance to success. Talking about this, the first video which I want you to watch at some point today, whenever you want to do it, well, after I finish my like a very long talk today, is that particular video, which is a built-in game environment in Unreal Engine. And that will basically go through this very, very similar project with the very, very similar scope, what we're going to do from the different artists, which is actually, well, so close to the project uh, specification that we have. Yeah. And it's very, very good result. And stylization. So that's a guy who is entrepreneur, and he actually have this learning content and resources for the stylized environment and assets. He's on YouTube, he's on other different platforms, and he sell courses, but also he collaborates very closely with a bunch of very talented artists. And there is lots of free videos that you can watch, and that will give you a very good benchmark that will show you that distinction level which I'm talking about. Okay, so the first thing, the brief. So what exactly you need to do? You guys need to create a stylized environment. So how much of the environment you need to create? If you look at assessment documents, it will say, well, how many modules, what the minimum amount of modules. And I think in the brief, the minimum amount of modules, like with our previous term, is really minimal. I can't remember how many I put, 5 maybe, just which is a very low amount. You would also need to actually this time experiment with the lighting. So not just a default atmosphere in game engine, but you would need to create a few lights, yeah, and experiment maybe with the position of the sun and create a certain atmosphere. Okay. You would need to texture everything, and you need to apply textures. You would also need to actually create foliage, like we did with the a previous unit. And what I did here is actually I create like a palm tree, and I will show you a software to create trees, which is called Tree It. and it's procedural online software. So we'll get to that and how you can quickly create a trees, for example, just outside this usual workflow, because we need to learn how to use other tools as well. So that's in a nutshell what you need to do. One other thing, and that's the part of the unit. After you create that environment, see the backdrop here, and see the backdrop see the backdrop here. That one. So see that structure? So that's a matte painting. So it's basically not really a 3D structure. It's just a picture which is painted in Photoshop into the rendered environment from the certain angle. So that's the part which is basically in the unit that you need to actually explore the matte painting. So we'll get to that. And that what probably the last week, like the week 9, we're going to do. Yeah. So you don't really have to worry about that much about matte painting at this stage, but you just have to keep in mind that that's part of the overall project scope. So environment plus matte painting plus variations in light. So you would need to actually come up with a couple of renders with different light conditions, yeah, like evening light maybe. There is other things in game engine that you can explore. But once again, I just going very briefly, I don't want to go into details. Now, what kind of environment you need to create? So here you have a restriction. So it's not completely open brief. So what are the restrictions? Your environment must be based around an old ancient architectural style which does exist. So if you look, let's say, at mine, you can guess that it's actually based on ancient Egyptian architecture. Yeah, kind of obvious. And you can select that's yours. Well, the reason why I actually for that particular, that's the 4th year we're running this particular unit, and it's 4th year which I'm teaching this. And all previous years, what I did is that I kind of work with you, not just like, well, like one of you, yeah? And I created 3 different environments. And I, first year I created like sort of a Greek sort of environment, yeah? The second year sort of like a medieval one, and last year ancient Egyptian. So the style of your environment, this base style, which does exist, real style, it's up to you to choose. And we had a guys who would look with something like Mayan architecture, a guys who would look with the ancient Asian architectures like Chinese, or the guys who would look at Khmer architecture like Angkor Wat temple in the border of the Cambodia and Vietnam, I think. Cambodia, yeah, I actually been there. And I was very little. It's the first time I cried in my life. We went to Angkor Wat, and the monkeys came to me, punched me in the head, and took my banana. I think I was 4 years old. I cried like it's the first time, you know. I remember I didn't know how to cry before that. I was very, very, very upset. So monkey robbed me in Angkor Wat, yeah, so that's why I remember it so vividly. Anyway, up to you. So how you can select? So what's the first? You should be genuinely excited about this architecture. I don't want you to work on something that you completely and utterly emotionally disconnect from. All these ancient architectures why I actually picked up ancient architectures. Two reasons. So first, and I don't really want you to actually mix them. I don't want you to create a sci-fi version, which is like a mix of different architectures plus a certain futuristic elements. So why I don't want to do it? In terms of the design, I want you to learn what the style is. So I want you to select a certain style, and I want you to stay within the main traits or features of that style and maintain consistency with that. And I also want you to learn to analyze the traits and find these escutcheons, the signature elements, which is actually define the style and how it's different from the other ancient styles. So that's a learning task. And in the process, you will learn about, say, if you learn about one ancient architecture, you will develop a system how to learn about others. So what's the sci-fi architecture? Yeah, it's a mix of different styles. So I want you to learn how to work with one style. So in the future, you can actually mix them and you would kind of understand what you're doing rather than this mix being completely and utterly random. So that's the first reason. The second reason, all these ancient architectures is using a very limited amount of material, which is predominantly stone. So based on our time that we have and the amount of work which we have to produce, I don't want you to work in the environment which is require a wide range of materials. It just to manage the risk. So I want you to stay with the selection of maybe like one simple material like stone, or maybe two, let's say like just a stone wall, maybe some bricks or whatnot. So that's the second reason. So the first thing you do for this concept and research stage, you open up PureRef, yeah, and you start to actually grab and create a library of the reference image with the style that you want to work with. So you need to make this decision. So I want you to probably spend time today to look at, let's say, two or three styles. So naturally, you probably have interest in one of them. Yeah, so I don't expect you to be like experts in certain architectural styles from the ancient times, but naturally, maybe you watched the movie, maybe you had experience like myself with the monkey, or maybe something else. But just follow your gut instinct and explore a certain civilization that you have a certain interest about. Okay, so you collect this PRF. The my PRF, I'll just show you mine here. So by the way, with the project management, okay, so that's a root folder for my project for that Egyptian temple. Set up a folder, and then it will be a structure of subfolders, and the actual game engine is here. Yeah, so that's a game engine. So where is my PDF? Okay. Okay, so let's just have a look at my PDF file here. So that's my PRF, and mine is probably not as comprehensive as a research that the guys do for the environment. So if you watch the video, you would have a different example how the guy did research. In the video, he's actually combined a couple of styles. He combined Yemen architecture with the Star Wars, a certain thing. So which is how the usual sci-fi world is actually built. So they pick up a ancient architecture and then they modify it a little bit. So I don't really want you to do it. So I just want to keep it as simple as possible. But you start to collect images. So then you collect images. How you actually, what's, how to approach that? So first, well, make this decision about the actual architectural style. Yeah. So the second thing, start research and try to find most iconic architectural structures. Most of them would be temples, yeah, of certain nature, yeah, for that particular architectural style. You can see that I actually have this temple in Luxor, Egypt. So that's a very famous temple here. And I picked up this temple as the foundation of my temple. And then I start to research and I start to find the pictures. So where to find pictures? Well, obviously Google search, Google Images, but also look at a website like Flickr.com. So the Flickr.com, it's now bought by Adobe, and that's online space where you can actually put your pictures. So what people mostly use it for, they go and travel and they fill out their memory stick and then they put it on, upload it on Flickr as they travel. So then they do it, they usually label it with the name of the places and they took the pictures. So if they took, went into this Luxor trip, yeah, into the Egypt, and they spend a day in Luxor and they make like 150 pictures, and then they upload like 50 of them on their Flickr account. And you actually you go into the Flickr and put Luxor in it, you will see these pictures, which is taken from different people. And pictures nowadays is very, very good. It's very high resolution. And it's something which you won't find on Google image search because the Google image search doesn't really have access to the Flickr sort of cloud space. So, and I usually use Flickr a lot, especially it's useful if you know this famous tourist destination. Make sense? So if you just look at the ancient Egyptian architecture in Flickr, no. In Google Images, yes. But if you know the name of the temple that you want to research, you will find much better quality reference images on Flickr. That actually not just the one. Well, the thing with my environment, guys, I last year what I really wanted to do, and the reason why it's so many sculptures here, I just want to sculpt a little bit in ZBrush. And that's something which you don't really have to do at all. Like I did all these different sculptures and like Nefertiti and Falcon here. And I actually created different folders for them, Ramses. So that's, and I actually created a separate PureRef. I created a separate PureRef for all my like a hero props. Yeah. So if you do a hero prop, and your hero prop doesn't necessarily have to be something which is require sculpting. Your hero prop could be a column, yeah, or arch, or some kind of pedestal, or a certain point, like a fountain. I don't know. Yeah. But you may want to actually create a separate research or the separate section in your main research for the hero prop. So that's the first step. That step is absolutely crucial. And that's probably not something that you just do in 2 hours and then stop and never do continue research again. It's something that you start and accumulate enough of resources to actually start your concept, a 2D concept, and then you continue your research as you go. So you basically continue to look, you just look at, if you have Pinterest account, you can create a gallery in Pinterest with that, and the Pinterest start to feed you the images which is similar to that, how it works nowadays. And you continue your research for the duration of the project. And as soon as then you go into details, you will find that you need to research a certain aspect, like how the flow look like, how the stones look like there, etc. Palm trees, how the palm trees look like, or some other trees, the artifact. So you would need to do more research. So it continues work. So in terms of the time frame for the research, you need to basically what you need to do today and almost like before the lunch, but I don't want to put too much pressure, well, but definitely today, you need to make this main decision which architectural style you want to work with. And basically after you made this decision, maybe let's say a couple of hours but I don't want you to jump. I don't want you to actually change this decision. I understand that sometimes happen, people start, okay, I'll do that, just to, I don't know, let's say the Greek. And then they're looking at the Greek and just doesn't go. And then you see some kind of Chinese temple. Think, it's so exciting. I'm going to switch. The time frame for you to switch is probably realistically like a couple of days. Because if you spend like a couple of weeks doing one theme and then switch into another, you'll be really, really behind. And that's another thing that you need to learn to manage as a professional is your emotion up and down swings. Because usually with the project like that, especially in the beginning, then you're just a junior artist or you're learning, this emotional up and down happens to pretty much everyone. You set yourself a goal, let's say work on ancient Egyptian theme, and at a certain point you will hit a stage that you have doubts and you think that it wasn't really a good idea, or you came up across the image, or you watched the movie about something, or you something out of the blue came and you think, oh, I want to change, I actually don't really want to do it, I want to do that. Happens to everyone. You need to learn how to actually manage this. The idea is that after you made this decision, you have to stick with this decision, because the doubts would come to everyone and you need to learn how to basically deal with that. It's not like you have to force something really, but you have to deal with your emotional swings, because the idea is the difference between amateur and professional is professional able to work on creative brief and deliver result all the time. So that's the main difference. Amateur could be actually brilliant, but amateur does what he wants to do into each single given moment. The professional does what he is actually signed up to do and deliver the result with 100% guarantee. So that's only the difference, not the quality of work, really. Okay, so you start with the PORF. Now, what's the next step? The next step is concept. How to approach the concept? Well, we'll probably talk about this more in details in the afternoon. Very, very briefly. Traditionally, you would have a pen, yeah, or the Wacom tablets. By the way, we have new Wacom tablets. I will bring them shortly, and you will help me to switch new to old, or old to new. So traditionally, and I did it like many years, you would start with the Wacom tablet and pencil, and you will start like black and white. And because it's environment, I usually actually start like architects, because I actually worked on real environment before I start working on 3D environment. And on real environment, you start with the floor plan. You just draw the floor plan first. Okay, and then you start to kind of draw wall elevations. You start build like from the ground up, like the tree grow. Yeah, and then after that you do a certain perspective things. How the stuff change nowadays? Well, you have AI. So you can actually, well, especially for the guys who is not really comfortable with drawing architecture in perspective, and most of the people not really comfortable with that because it's very particular set of skills. Some people naturally do it better. Some people actually struggle with that. So now we have AI, so you can go into AI of your choice, and I can, guys, guarantee you now. So I'm working with AI now like 2.5 years. Yeah, so I'm just like AI sort of baby stage, I guess. But I 100% guarantee you that it is going to be a major tool in your professional life. And you can't ignore that. So you can ignore that, but you will put yourself in a very disadvantageous position. So the thing with AI, that the concept that AI created with the prompt, so you still have to be able to actually communicate your idea verbally and explain AI what to do. Let's say ancient temple, like Luxor in Egypt, located in the Rocky Mountains with the statues of Ramses, etc. So you give this description. So you still must use your imagination and create this a mental picture based on your research, but you just write it down and you put it into the AI, Leonardo or Midjourney, and there is, well, we don't have, I can guarantee you that in 3 or 4 years we'll have a unit about how to work with the AI in different stages. So I use the AI and I get this bunch of the concepts, like that bunch of the concepts. And it take like, I don't know, 10-15 minutes to generate them. And then I selected, let's say, something which I thought interesting because I wanted to be like embedded into the rock face, yeah? And what you do next? The next thing you do is you have a couple of options. So you can take this AI and you can kind of paint over or create your a manual version of that. But I guess that the most of the guys would actually start in 3D. And in 3D, you do a block out stage. So after you have this initial idea, and you would, guys, need to generate it. So, well, you can use AI, you can paint it, you can scrabble, doesn't really matter. What matters is that your idea of the environment should be clear enough for you to start work in 3D. So the step 2D stage, you can't skip. You can't go from the bunch of the reference images straight away into 3D. You need to actually create a 2D concept. Once again, how to create 3D concept and the look of 3D concept is really not that important nowadays. If you professional concept artist, then yes, you create a high definition, beautifully rendered 3D environment in perspective with details. But you guys not really learning how to be a concept artist. If you want to be a concept artist, spend a little bit more time doing this. If you want to be a 3D artist, learn how to actually create concept on the budget. And in terms of the budget, I mean time. But you need to describe your idea visually in 2D before you jump in 3D. Your 2D idea is never final version. Well, unless you really, really good concept artist and you create a very, very tuned, refined environment. But even in this case, if you're working for the game industry, then your 2D concept is just a slice. It doesn't describe your environment fully. Yeah, so it's an environment is flexible in games because it can extend. Yeah, so you can extend the level, or you can create another level which is variation of that. Yeah, so you're going towards the temple, and next level you're going inside the temple. Yeah, so it just reference. So after that, so that thing you basically need to create by the end of today. Your reference board and your attempts with the concepts. And that's something that we're going to work with you individually. That's where you get a certain support, whether it's realistic or not. We're going to discuss that. So after that, what you do is that you start working on in Maya, and I like to work in Maya. And you work on something which is called blockout. So what's the blockout? The blockout is you try to create your environment in using a basic primitives, yeah, cube, circle, etc. So you start to build your blockout. Well, in my blockout, so how detailed blockout is. So first, you need to start with your character reference. That's a must, because everything is in relationships to the human figure, your character figure. So that's the first thing that you need to import in your blockout. So you use this figure from the previous term. If you lost it, I will. I think you can download. I have it only. And then you start to blocking it out, and you can see that one is sort of based on this. On this one, yeah, roughly, yeah. So you don't really copy AI, but we have like a columns here. So the columns are different one. I picked up columns from the Luxor, not just a square columns, walls, etc. You try to build it from the blocks, so it is like it's actually like just a square, yeah, beveled blocks. How detailed your block out should be? Well, in my kind of approach, obviously here I have these guys, which is I actually did in ZBrush. But I said that what I wanted for this environment, I actually, in terms of my skills building, I want to just practice the ZBrush sculpting. So I sculpt them separately. I knew that I want to use them in the environment. So you guys most likely not going to do that, yeah? If you want, by all means, but it will be much more time for you to do it. So it's like an extra project altogether. So realistically, you would be working with, let's say, props like that. Let's say column, yeah? Some kind of architectural piece, like part of the cornice here, like steps, maybe a little bit more like central pieces, some kind of pedestal, yeah, whatnot. So all of that would come ideas from your research and from your initial concept. Then you do block out. You can keep certain things very simple, like the part of the wall, yeah, just a primitive. But then you have, let's say, a little bit more, not a hero prop, but let's say architectural element which is define the style. So the column should look like Egyptian column, not like a Greek column and not like just a cylinder. So you need to create a limited amount of details, which is A, define the style, and B, give idea about the scale in relationships to your character. But it's still block out. So at the block out stage, you're not really worry about your perfect topology. You're not worry about actually creating, let's say, a continuous mesh. You can use the floating geometry as much as you want. Yeah. You can skip most of the details, but you have to identify the key details. The key details usually stuff which is visible on silhouette, which is create a silhouette. So for example, if we look at the column and we'll look, let's say, at a silhouette of that column, you see that it's Egyptian column. Yeah, so you won't really think it's a Greek column, yeah, or any other sort of. You see, and that's what the block out details should be. And also we need um, a scale reference. So how detail and how this detail is relate to the human character. Okay, so you do this block out. So the block out has to be done by the end of next week. So that's the pace. At the stage of the block out, you don't really try to build the finished environment. You just try to kind of translate your 2D concept into 3D. Quite a lot of guys, after they do block out, they just bring it into the game engine or just get a render from Maya, put it in Photoshop, and then they paint over lights and textures. Very common. Once again, watch the video on the introduction page. It will be more details about that approach. I kind of don't really like to do it, personally, personal choice. But quite a lot of guys actually, after they do block out, they kind of go back in Photoshop and 2D concept, and they using this 3D, they kind of put a nice angle, and then just paint over, so they don't have to worry about perspective, but they can concentrate on the color schemes. That's probably very important, especially if you're working on sci-fi stuff. So you need to kind of, you don't have a reference for the sci-fi stuff, yeah? You may have some reference from the movies, etc., but you want to create something original and unique. So you do your block out, and then in Photoshop, You start to think, well, how the textures look like, how the metal is going to work with the stone or with the wood, what kind of patterns, what the scale. A very good approach. So once again, that would be like an extra level of complexity. And that's the reason why I want you to work with the existing style and not really invent the architectural element by yourself. It'll be just jumping over too many steps. Just learn how to work with the existing material first, and then you can invent your own stuff. Okay, so after you've done your block out, the next step is translate the block out into the library of the modular pieces. The idea with the environment that you need to create a minimal amount of module, which is like a 3D assets, that you need to build level environment, which is scalable. What it means scalable? It means that if the temple, let's say, has 4 columns, I can actually make it having 8 columns. I can extend that, I can put more statues. So nothing, because it's all built out of the modular pieces. Yeah, so I have a column, I have a span, I have a wall block, I have a step, I have 3 different stones, I have a unique element here is pedestal, then the torch sort of something, and then the top element. That's it. So all environments in all games is built from the small amount of modules that you can repeat. We're going to talk about modules in a separate session, and I will show you many different examples of how to approach that. But idea is that you don't create modules right away. First, you create block out, so you kind of roughly build this environment from primitives with concentrating on key elements and try to get the silhouette right. And then you re-evaluate your block out, and then you break it down into the library. You line up your library. And then what happened with the library, you're going into the game engine. And you just grab all of this and you create your block out inside the game engine. And inside the game engine, you actually start to think about the gameplay, and you start to think how it feels like. Do I need more space or smaller space? Is the scale right? Does it feel epic, or does it have to feel epic? Yeah, maybe it have to feel a little bit cozier. Yeah, so you do your block out variation in the game engine. And after, it's all grayscale, so it's all no materials, yeah, just default lights. You sculpt your landscape, yeah, so you do all of this stuff. And you create this a rough version of your environment in the game engine. Okay, so there is a couple of videos here. So something like that. It's quite a lot of guys is actually using this term gray box for that. Why? Because it's gray, just a Lambert material, gray box. So variation. And after you've done your gray box and game engine, then you have a pretty good idea that your environment is basically going to work. So at gray box stage, you do your environment design. After you've done environment design, you're going back to Maya and you start to actually transfer your library of doing gray box. You may find that you need extra element, or you may find that your element that you created need to have some like extra detail, something or other. But after you've done all of that, you're going back here, and then you start basically build your final modules piece by piece. So you grab your piece, let's say column, you create UVs, you put, let's say, it into the ZBrush or create a high resolution, then you go into the substance painter, you create a set of the textures, and then going back and export your final low resolution model. And usually the way it's done, there is a trick here with naming convention. But idea is that you keep your naming convention consistent. And then if you have a final version of the column, your low resolution column, you just re-import it into the game engine, and all your block out is basically updated with the final column. So you don't have to create a second, like rebuild your stuff in game engine, because everything sits. All you do is basically updating the geometry, and after you update geometry, all of that is instances of your asset, and then you create material, and then you drop this material on your main column. It's all updated. So the process is very, very sort of smart in that sense. And then you build, so that's your kind of like a building process. You're going from just doing module by module, module by module, module by module. There is obviously, it just like scratch the surface a little bit. There is different things that you can do. Let's say, for example, that flow here, I think that's the version number 3. And what I did for the floor, what I did for the floor, I'll show you a little bit later, but it's a slightly different material, which is basically a scalable material. So the flow I didn't really build as a set of tiles. I build it just as continuous block, which I can resize. Just my handles here, I can't see them, so just where is my handles here? I just forgot my handle's not kind of showing. Yeah, but you see, if I scale, you see that material is actually scale with the flow. Yeah. So that's just a different type of material. It just tiles as it goes. And well, obviously you can learn a bunch of the stuff. You can learn, let's say, I don't know, like layered material, but not for the landscape, but for the meshes. Then you have, let's say, a bricks and then render. And then you can use Vertex Paint. Remember that we did it for the grass? But you can use that inside the game engine to reveal and hide different layers of materials. So there is plenty of stuff you can learn extra, yeah. So, but well, even if we keep it to the basics, it'll be still quite a lot of things to learn. So all of that at the like a stage of the final building these assets, yeah. So you go on and you build your final assets, and then you build your final assets. In the process, you can refine your gray box, yeah. You can add elements, you can remove elements, you can move them around, so it's all quite fluid. So you can refine that. You can put, let's say, different effects here, like flames. I will show you how to do it. It's not that difficult. Um, Play with the lights, put the foliage, decorate. So all of these extra stuff that you can do to your environment, I will give you resources if you want to. So once again, it's not really required to pass the unit, but it's required for you to actually get job. So don't put too much pressure on yourself. Do it steadily. And then you get to the stage that you start to finalize. You will see whether you have extra time to learn a little bit more, or you just have enough time to complete all the steps. So after you finalize all your modules and you create all your textures and create all your materials, all you need to experiment with the light a little bit. Just create new lights, find the angles, create a couple of renders, submit the paperwork, and the last bit we'll look at the matte painting. And we're done. Okay? Any questions, guys, at this stage? So now, I think that I talked enough. You can have a little break, like, well, good 12 minutes till 11. And after that, I want you to start thinking about the architectural style that you want to work with. I want you to make this decision reasonably quickly. I want you to get the PORF, and I want you to actually start grabbing and collecting a library of reference images. Make sure that you make in your library, you actually put some notes in PORF. Control N to create a note, yeah? And mainly, you can just put your thoughts. You can put like references. But if you work with the architectural stuff, find one or two specific temples or locations for that style that you want to use as your primary reference and inspiration. Write it, the name of that, yeah? If you come, let's say, in a certain website, I found that website with a lot of pictures, put a source here so you can go back to the website. That is actually my prompt for the Midjourney. That one here, so that's my prompt to actually start generating the concepts. Okay, guys, so that's it. I hope that you will have more questions as you go. Just the very, very last thing which I want to tell you. Certain styles is more difficult to work compared to the others. The styles which is most difficult to work with is the most ornated one. So if we look at mine architecture, for example, it kind of, the base shapes are very, very simple, but there is quite ornated faces, which is require quite a lot of work. So that's technically difficult to actually model, and it's probably makes sense to sculpt. So once again, it's not something which is impossible to do, possible, but it's extra level of complexity compared to something which is more minimalistic, like ancient Egyptian architecture, or even, let's say, Greco-Roman architecture. There's certain, let's say, Asian architecture, like okay, so that's the place where I was robbed by monkeys. So once again, it's the structure is very, very, very complex, difficult. And if we look at some like Chinese architecture, or the roof profiles are quite difficult to do. So what I mean difficult, I mean it's not a basic level of modeling. It's towards the middle advanced level, and would require combination of modeling and sculpting. And once again, that goes towards the idea that I want to manage your expectations, and I want you to be realistic with assessment of your current skills. So idea is that you will set yourself a task which is actually achievable within the next basically 8 weeks. Yes, or 9 weeks is matte painting. So, and something that you can do without major breakdown. Yeah, so what we need is just like a steady growth. Yeah, so we don't want to try to jump like 2.5 meter height, uh, which we only can jump like 50 centimeters. Yeah. So keep that in mind. Make your decision. Start PURF. So what I will do, I will kind of circle around and I talk to you guys individually in case that once again you will set yourself up to do something which is too risky. I'll just, I'm not going to kind of say what you can't do it, yeah, but I will just warn you because well, 4 years we've been working on this. I've seen quite a few of the different students. Well, some of them been incredibly successful. So I had a guy, not with this, but very similar project, like 20 years ago, I guess, very early. And he did Aztec temple, magnificent, without ZBrush, without anything. He just used black and white stencils, which he drew pencil on paper. And he did an incredible job with the game engine, with the emissive color. So it's basically he had the flood of light coming out of this Aztec stuff. So that was magnificent. So it's all doable, but it's, well, just have to. But he put a lot of time into it, a lot of time. Anyway, guys, so that's it from me for the morning session. Um, let's start the work. What I will do is I will bring up new Wacom tablets and I will ask you, as you just unpack at least one, yeah, and we'll start. Basically, you would need to start using your Wacom tablet maybe at some stage today. Okay, so any questions? No, all good?